Today, I'm also issuing an executive order that will ultimately end the Justice Department's use of private prisons, an industry that houses pretrial detainees and federal prisoners.
That's good news and incredibly rare, something that I'm not used to after 4 years of Donald Trump, where most of his press conferences announced some pretty disastrous efforts. But here, the efforts by Biden to minimize the use of private prisons on a federal level is welcome news, because these prisons have been absolutely disgusting in the way that they abuse inmates in order to cut costs and make money for their board of investors. That's how private prisons are run. They're run with a profit motive. So again, I'm delighted that Biden has decided to essentially reverse what Trump did in the beginning of his term, where he went back to increasing the federal use of private prisons. Now, under the new policies, the Justice Department will not renew contracts with private prison operators. Again, that's good news. However, there is a pretty giant caveat, which raises some more questions for me. Now, Biden says, that this is part of his effort to push for racial equality in the country, which is important. And when you have private prisons with a profit motive, they push to incarcerate more and more people. And typically, and this is certainly reflected in the statistics and demographics, communities that consist of people of color and Black individuals are the ones targeted. They're the ones who become criminalized for nonviolent behavior, and they're the ones who end up going to these private prisons. So I get the reasoning here, and again, this is welcome news. Now here's the caveat though. That order will not apply to other federal agencies, just the Justice Department, who may contract with those same operators, such as US Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So this is something that we talked about in great detail as Trump was imprisoning asylum seekers at the border, including children. These prisons at the border are usually operated by private companies. And so the question that I have now for the Biden administration is, what are you gonna do to reverse Trump's disastrous policies on immigration? Because remember, Trump made a point to detain everyone and hold them in these private prisons that profited handsomely from government contracts. And so I would like to see Biden go further. Again, this is welcome news, but simply directing the Justice Department to avoid renewing contracts clearly doesn't go far enough. I would like to see some efforts made in regard to ICE and Border Patrol and their use of these private prisons. But Ida, I wanted to get some of your thoughts.
I think this is great, lovely. The prison system in America is also awful, right? Whether they're state prisons or private prisons, we have more people in state prisons than we do have in these private prisons. And the prison system where our children go to these schools in public neighborhoods where they're being prepared for prison is a reality. So when we talk about what Joe Biden and his administration is doing, specifically for the Black community and the brown communities, and I will say Black communities, a lot of promises were made. Black people and brown people showed out in numbers, and now you coming out with we're not renewing contracts for private prisons. We're gonna put Harriet Tubman on a $20 bill. These communities are really struggling right now. They have been struggling for a long time as a result of some of the acts that Joe Biden committed and that he's trying to fix now. We hear you, but what are you really going to do to help these communities? Because yes, the private prisons have to go, but the state prisons ain't no, that ain't no rainbow coalition either. That ain't no, for lack of a better term, it's not like an ideal situation. There are a lot of people who are incarcerated because of for marijuana, which now you are making profit from and taxing and getting dollars from. How are you going to really go in and repair and create trust in communities of Black and brown people and Black American people who really showed up for you? And these are the efforts, and these are the things that infuriate the people. And that's why they continue to say, and we continue to say, that the conditions have not changed, because these are just little, these little appetizers that they keep handing us. We need a real meal. We need a real meal. And if you are really saying that you care about the communities and all of the Americans in this country matter to you, when are you going to show up for Black people in this country who showed up and put you in office?
Right. I'm curious how much the federal government can do to potentially ban the use of private prisons on a state level, because most of these not most of them, state level private prisons are contracted based on local lawmakers, state and local lawmakers. However, that's not to say that if Congress genuinely wanted to do something robust for criminal justice reform, they could draft up legislation and pass legislation that bans the use of private prisons with a profit motive to incarcerate people. And your point is such a valid one, Aida. If you look at Louisiana specifically, it's one of the top states in imprisoning people. They have a giant prison population, and they love contracting, private prisons in order to incarcerate people. And oh wow, what a shock! The vast majority of people they imprison happen to be Black and brown individuals. So it's a valid point, and this is a good first step from Biden. But it's important to get involved in local politics as well, and ensure that you're fully aware of what your local politicians are doing. Because if you read the fine print, if you read the details in these contracts with these private prisons on a state level, they have clauses in them that indicate that they need to be paid for a certain capacity, meaning that even if they don't have beds or cells with prisoners in them, or I shouldn't say prisoners, with with people in them, that the state still has to pay for those beds. So it's written in such a way that even if they're doing nothing, they get paid for it. And look, honestly, I'd rather them do nothing than imprison people for nonviolent offenses. And they don't do anything to rehabilitate people. That's the other thing. There's no rehabilitative component to these private prisons. But there is a problem with this on a state level, absolutely. And there's a problem with it on a federal level. And in Biden's jurisdiction, he can push to do something even more robust by ensuring that Immigration and Border Patrol ceases to use these private prisons to detain undocumented immigrants, which I don't really know why we're detaining them anyway. There should be a trial, and if they are asylum seekers with a valid reason to be here, they should be allowed into the country. And if they don't have a valid reason, then they can't come in. Why are we detaining them for months and months, sometimes years at a time? It makes no sense.
So what I wanted to say was, and I have a grasp on the difference between the state level and the federal level, but what I want to say is that the president, and we've seen in the last 4 years, has taken the liberties to make an impact on states and has stepped into the state's business when they feel like they can. But when it comes to Black people in America, and when it comes to brown people in America, it's, oh no, that's on the states. You hear the states got it over here, the states got it over there. When is it that what is happening in the communities of color in this country is it's a national emergency. It is not just local jurisdiction issues. Yes, the state politicians, but I still think Joe Biden has to take a good faith step in the direction of healing some of the problems that he caused in Black people communities and brown people communities back in the day. And I'm just tired of this rhetoric where it's never anyone's responsibility, because we jump back and forth. Well, that's a federal issue. This is a state issue. But when it's convenient, you step into the state's business. And I just think that we need to start having conversations about this. And yes, hold all of the local politicians accountable and get rid of the trash that is in there. We need to take out the trash throughout the entire country. But I'm just saying that we need to have a conversation, a national conversation about the problem of prisons in this country, because it is a national issue that there are so many Black and brown people in prison.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the heart of that is the types of laws that criminalize behavior that doesn't need to be criminalized, right? Mm-hmm. So in 1984, which is just the most appropriate year, private prisons really started to explode in America because that was when the war on drugs was really ramped up. And so more and more communities of color were targeted for drug possession, drug use, specifically marijuana and cocaine. And it was a very clear concerted effort to target certain communities and imprison members of those communities. And private prisons were like, oh, would you look at that? Looks like these publicly run prisons are at capacity and there's an opportunity to make money here. And so they got in, and that was when things really started to explode with our prison population. But yeah, I mean, you make great points all around, Ida. And when you think about how many people, we imprison more people than any other country in the world per capita.
Yep.
It's beyond shameful. Well, and I want to just quickly mention a few of the other executive orders that Biden signed. This is okay. I mean, I would just go further than Biden to be quite honest with you. But he's instructing the Department of Housing and Urban Development to reassess. I don't know why do you need to reassess this? To reassess moves implemented under former President Donald Trump, including making it harder for plaintiffs to meet the legal threshold for proving unintentional discrimination, known as the disparate impact rule. So basically, under Trump, this was an executive order Trump signed in order to allow landlords to discriminate without, facing, legal action or have, where it would be more difficult for tenants to pursue legal action. He, did this, this rule. And I don't know why Biden needs to reassess it. Obviously, the Trump campaign implemented this to make it easier for landlords to discriminate against their tenants or potential tenants. We don't need to reassess it, just reverse it. If you know you can reverse it through an executive order, be done with it. Yeah. Be done with it. Like, what are you doing?
The hand of Ben Carson, that was the brain surgeon that was over urban and housing. That's the thing that makes people take a pause. The reason why you're taking a pause right now is like, why are we pussyfooting around these issues when we know that the people are suffering? And people get mad at me and they tweet me and they're like, all you keep talking about is race, race, race. Racial inequality in this country is the root of so much ills in the communities of people that come from where I come from and worse. And so all of this stuff that we're talking about that was in place, throw it out in the trash and really make a change and show up for the people who showed up for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, there's nothing to reassess with that HUD rule. Reverse it, be done with it, period.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.